A horse in labor had run off into the forest, and now she'd stumbled into something terrible. Right in front of her owner's eyes, a pack of wolves had surrounded her. One of them was tugging the foal out with its teeth. But what happened next brought this man to tears. Nick had been looking everywhere for his horse. He'd searched all over his land, but now he was starting to worry she might have gone into the woods. His property backed up to a national forest, and while there was a small fence marking the edge, he'd never put up a full barrier. Now he was kicking himself, realizing he'd have to search a huge area. He had a few animals, but Star was different. Star was his baby. He always kept a close eye on her, but today he was more anxious than ever, because the last time he saw her, she was about to give birth. He'd been checking all her favorite spots, but she was nowhere. He felt sick with worry, and he was just heading toward the river when he saw it. There she was, Star, standing in the woods. But she wasn't alone. A pack of wolves had gathered around her. Nick froze. His heart was pounding. He was too far to do anything, but maybe, just maybe, if he yelled loud enough, he could scare them off. So he started shouting, waving his arms like crazy, hoping to drive them away. The wolves turned toward him, and that's when his stomach dropped. One of them had a scar across its nose. And just like that, Nick was pulled back into a memory. It was from another day in the forest when things had been different. He'd been riding Star, just the two of them out for a peaceful afternoon. They were galloping through the trees, and Nick had felt totally free. Then, suddenly, Star stopped in her tracks. Her ears perked up. Nick tried to get her to turn back, but she wouldn't budge. Instead, she took a different route, her own path, and Nick let her lead the way. Every few steps, she paused to listen, then kept going. Eventually, she brought him to a rocky hillside with a small opening in the stone. It looked like a wolf had made a den there, a mother maybe. But something awful had happened. The mother wolf was lying still, badly hurt. She'd clearly been in a fight. There was blood, and she wasn't going to make it. Her pups were tiny, way too young to survive alone. But they looked healthy. It was like Star had sensed they needed help. The pups ran up to her, sniffing and bumping into her legs. She didn't flinch. Instead, she let out a soft, gentle neigh. Nick stood there, unsure at first, but there was no way he could leave them. He bent down to take one last look at the mother, making sure she was truly gone. Then, with a heavy breath, he began gathering the pups. Star didn't mind at all, so Nick carefully tucked them into his saddlebags and closed them up. So Nick took the pups home. He fed them and cared for them, but no matter what he did, their hearts stayed tied to the horse. They adored her. Nick made sure they spent plenty of time outside. While they were still little, he'd let them play in a small fenced-in area he usually used for animal checkups. It was roomy enough for them to run around, but still safe and contained. One afternoon, the pups were out there playing while Star was relaxing in the pasture nearby. All of a sudden, they started howling and yelping loudly. Their cries caught Star's attention, and she took off toward them without hesitation. The pasture gate wasn't latched tight. It swung open easily when she pressed against it. She bolted straight toward the enclosure. Nick had just come out from feeding his goats when he heard the noise. He turned just in time to see Star sprinting across the yard. She shoved herself against the enclosure gate, but that one didn't budge. So she reared up and pushed with her front legs. The gate snapped open from the impact, bits of wire flying. Star charged in, and Nick ran after her. Inside, the pups were barking like crazy. Nick stepped around the mare to see what they were worked up about. Just a quick glance told him everything. There was a snake in there. And not just any snake. It was one of the most dangerous ones in the area. If it bit one of the pups, they wouldn't make it. Normally, a mother wolf would have taught them to stay away from snakes like that. But since they didn't have her, they were acting on pure curiosity. What looked like a game could have ended in tragedy. Nick and Star both loved these pups deeply. Losing even one would be heartbreaking. But Star didn't wait. She acted before Nick even had a chance to move. She stomped hard on the snake and kicked what was left across the yard. Nick might have tried to catch it and release it elsewhere, but Star didn't take chances. Her instinct was to protect, no matter what. Nick exhaled, finally catching his breath, until he looked down and saw one of the pups staring up at him. There was a gash running across the bridge of his nose. His heart dropped. Had the snake gotten to him? Nick scooped him up by the scruff and rushed inside. He called out for Harry, who kept the first aid kit. Star and the other pups followed close behind, confused but concerned. This pup was usually the most energetic of the bunch, but now he just lay in Nick's arms. That quiet stillness scared Nick more than anything else. Was the venom already spreading? Trying to stay calm, Nick cleaned the wound under a bright light. But then he noticed something strange. There were no puncture marks, no sign of fangs, just a long scrape. Suddenly, he wasn't so sure the snake had anything to do with the injury at all. And then one day, they just didn't come back. The wolf pups had gone off into the wild, right where they were meant to be. Star missed them. She was down for a while after they left, but a few years later, everything changed. She was expecting a baby of her own. Her wolf family had moved on, but now she was about to start a new one. Nick kept a close eye on her during the pregnancy. He had an equine vet come out to the cabin every 2 weeks to check her over. For months, everything looked great. But when labor finally started, something felt off. Star was acting restless, and it seemed like she was having a hard time. Things were taking longer than they should have, and Nick didn't like it. He called the vet to come right away, but when he stepped back outside after the call, his heart sank. The gate was wide open, and Star was gone. He forgot all about the vet in that moment. All that mattered was finding her. He rushed out to look, and when he finally spotted her, surrounded by a pack of wolves, pure fear gripped him. But then he locked eyes with one of them and saw a scar across the nose. Relief hit him like a wave. These were the wolves he and Star had raised. They had come back, and deep down Nick believed they wouldn't hurt the horse that had once been their mother. But as soon as he thought that, worry crept in. They'd been wild for years now. Could they have changed? Would they be jealous of the new baby? He now recognized all 3 of the original cubs, but there were new wolves in the pack too, true wild ones. And Nick didn't know what they were capable of. But there was no more time to think. Star was in the middle of giving birth. Nick could already see the foal's head. And then some of the wolves stepped in and pulled the baby out with their sharp teeth. Nick was frozen. His chest tightened. He was sure they were going to hurt it. Star let out a tired, broken neigh and sank to the ground beside them. She looked too weak to defend herself. Nick stood there, helpless, heart aching for what he thought was about to happen. But it didn't. As soon as the foal was free, the wolves gently placed him down. Then they started licking him, treating him like he was one of their own pups. It was like the love they had for Star had instantly transferred to her baby. They cleaned him off, softly nudging him to get him on his feet. Nick stood there, eyes full of tears, watching something he never imagined he'd see. The wolves also turned to Star. She was still lying down, worn out but calm now. The wolves gathered close, curled up next to her, even licking her face and sides like they were comforting her. It was an unbelievably sweet moment, but Nick still had to step in to check on both Mom and baby. The newer wolves stayed back, watching carefully. But the 3 who'd grown up with Nick and Star ran up around him, tails wagging and eyes bright, like they were welcoming an old friend home. Nick reached out like he used to, hand out to scratch their heads, but then paused. Maybe they weren't used to that anymore. Maybe it would make them uncomfortable. But then the wolf with the scar stepped forward. He lowered his head and gently placed it into Nick's hand. They remembered. They'd missed this. It felt like a family reunion. Star and her little one were doing well. But as the light began to fade and evening crept in, Star seemed to know it was time to head home. She slowly got up, and Nick bent down to lift the baby. The foal wasn't strong enough yet to walk all the way back, so Nick carried him. He figured the wolves would say their goodbyes there, but to his surprise, they followed. They stayed right alongside him, all the way home. When he placed Star and her foal in the stable, they stood nearby, watching quietly, almost like they were making sure everything was all right. Nick had a small flicker of worry. He had other animals, and wild wolves nearby could mean trouble. But nothing happened. It was like the original three had somehow made it clear to the rest. This place was full of friends, not food. None of Nick's goats or other animals were ever harmed. But what truly shocked him was what happened next. The wolves didn't disappear into the forest right away. They walked over to their old den, the same enclosure they'd used as pups. It hadn't been touched in years. Inside were still their old water bowls and bedding. Nick opened the door. The whole pack walked in like it was home. They stayed for a few days, resting and quietly watching as the foal grew stronger. Then, just like before, they slipped back into the forest. Without their help, Nick knew Star and her baby might not have made it. Saying goodbye was hard, but he was so grateful they came when they did. And the most amazing part? That wasn't the last time he saw them. Every now and then they came back, just to rest, or to visit the place they once called home. They had their life in the wild, but they also had this, a second home, a bond. And Nick was proud to be part of that. What an incredible story. Did you think the wolves would protect the foal? Do you believe wild animals remember those who care for them? Tell us what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that'll warm your heart and remind you of the goodness still out there.
If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider sharing it with someone who may find it interesting. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.